This session is all about how you can enhance your SolidWorks desktop that you know and love and are using today, how you can enhance that with some of these next generation design tools that we have been working on here at SolidWorks for a while. And we'll see a little bit of how they work with each other and really how they can empower pretty much any SolidWorks user. So the big idea I'd say is really today it's around the idea of how connecting SolidWorks to the 3D Experience Cloud just opens a whole plethora of doors. And we're going to start at the very basics, at the very beginning for how it affects all SolidWorks users, and then how you can continue to expand into these different design-focused areas that are pretty incredible in a lot of ways. But I'll let you be the judge of that. So let's jump in to first our agenda. We have 6 topics, and the very first one is called cloud services. So if you're not familiar, if you haven't been keeping up with SolidWorks, at 3D Experience World last year, we announced that cloud services is going to be included in all new seats of SolidWorks. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it's going to make it a lot easier to do a few things right from within desktop SolidWorks. And the first thing is the share button. And this has got to be my favorite, that you can share any part, assembly, or drawing from this one button, and you can share it externally. You can make sure that the people on the other side can add comments, and you can make sure only certain users can access it. And then sharing it, it's stored in the secure cloud, and this is what it'll look like on the other end for your recipient. Eric Engineer shared this part with you. Go ahead and click more to see inside. And then when you do open it, it opens in this very lightweight viewer in a browser, right in the browser, where you can mark it up, you can sketch on it, you can use our dimension tool to measure, and you can take screenshots and add them right as comments to that instance of the part in the cloud. And this is all just to make it a lot easier to actually share some of those big files. And back in SolidWorks, we can open up and actually see that feedback right here without leaving the SolidWorks window at all. And we can check that out, the different slides that have been created for us, and then fast forward right to our design change, actually implementing the design changes. And this is the next level. Okay, so we first can share parts. Now we can actually store them in the 3D Experience Cloud, and that allows us to do things like make new revisions. So revision management is a big thing that our users are always in need of, because the product development process it's just not linear. You're going to need to make a lot of incremental steps along the way, and it might not always be pretty, but this revision management that's built in is there for you to use from day one. And then, of course, being able to lock and unlock components in an assembly is just incredibly powerful and helps us avoid that dreaded file overwrite. You're working on an assembly or that somebody else has something open in, and you accidentally overwrite their changes. Well, this is no longer an issue that we have when your data is actually stored in the 3D Experience Cloud. All right, and because they are on the cloud, you can access them anywhere. This is up in our browser viewer, and just showing an example of a drawing. One of my favorite things that you can do is actually see that little slider that just showed up at the top. The red and the green shows like Rev 1 versus Rev 2, or the two competing drawings that we're comparing here. Just makes it really easy to collaborate and actually work together. And redlining is just so much easier on drawings in this environment. So the next level is kind of more being able to document issues and do more formal markups of the assembly. So you can actually kind of build like almost a slideshow that is all in 3D. And this is more of what we're going to touch on today. So this is Dan Designer's tasks for today, and he needs to work on this new updated crank arm. And we're going to use SolidWorks and all of these other tools that complement SolidWorks to get the job done. So that's a high level of what cloud services is. I want to check and see. I think we have a poll question right now. Let's go ahead and launch that first poll, which is, how often do you need to access your CAD data remotely? And how often do you work with other engineers or designers on a CAD project? So that poll should be up there for you. You should be able to click in and answer it. We're going to try to keep this session as interactive as we can. Again, and it will really help us know that, hey, we're talking to the right people that are working with a lot of engineers that do have a need to collaborate. And of course, you can always ask your questions right in the Q&A panel here in the Zoom webinar.
I love it. We're getting a variety of answers here.
Yeah,
Looks like weekly. Yeah.
Yeah. Weekly is definitely the winner on this multiple times on how often do you need to access your CAD data remotely? Yeah. And then some say almost never. All right, thank you for answering that poll, everyone. I'm gonna end it and I'm gonna share the results so that you can all see. So it seems like most people don't need to access their CAD data multiple times per day, or maybe not even daily, but at least once a week to once a month, somewhere in there. It seems like almost everybody needs to access their CAD data remotely at some points. And then the second question was, how often do you work with other engineers? And over half of you are working with other designers or engineers at least daily, which is pretty incredible, which at least daily to weekly, it looks like. And looks like very few of you are kind of on an island. Most of you are working with others, which the 3D experience is built to make that easier. So you're in the right place. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing these results now, and I will reshare my screen. Let me know when you can see that, Noah.
Yeah, I'm looking at your screen now. Cloud surfaces.
Perfect. Oh, beautiful. Okay, great. So let's move on to these complementary tools we were talking about. So we showed what's new in SolidWorks, but we're able to share, we're able to mark up, we're able to store and revise SolidWorks data in the cloud. And there's actually quite a bit more that you can do, but for what's immediately valuable to you today as a SolidWorks user, this is where I recommend starting. Share your files with a link, store them in the cloud so you can revise them and not overwrite changes. Let's move on to sub-D modeling, okay? So sub-D modeling it's inherently different than SolidWorks. It's kind of a different way of thinking about modeling in general, where we're manipulating a mesh that ends up giving us some crazy swoopy surface like you see on screen. As you can imagine, you probably wouldn't want to have to model that with traditional surfacing tools. But if we jump into XShape, our sub-D modeling app, we can start with a reference image, or you could just start by dragging in a blob of clay, or a primitive shape rather, and just start pushing and pulling until you get the shape that you're looking for. Of course, we can adjust those parameters. And then most of XShape is just using this manipulator to push, pull, rotate, and scale until you get the shape that you're looking for. So no need to spend hours creating sketches and surfacing features anymore. So you can snap entities to a line that you can click and drag the endpoints of. And when you need to add more detail in your surface, you can subdivide or extrude faces, insert new edge loops. You can add creased edges to break your surface up, either for style or function. And you can adjust the smoothness and severity of those creases. And when you're modeling from 2D sketches, jumping back and forth between orthographic views from one profile to another just makes it a lot easier to sculpt that shape that you're looking for. All right, so we can copy and paste previous surfaces to explore new concepts and scale them if we need to, and then just continue sculpting. Using the reflect tool allows us to create a mirrored copy of our subdivision surface, and we can jump right into a section view while we're modeling. And we can't forget to check for manufacturability with things like draft analysis. So when checking the quality of your surface, we'll use this mesh inspection tool a lot to make sure we don't have overlapping elements and we end up with the highest quality surface. And as your surfaces do become more complex, we have a separate mode of modeling called soft selection that will allow us to manipulate just more vertices at once. As you can see here, we're just We're just using the robot most of the time, that little manipulator with the arrows and arcs to make small incremental changes, and we're just slowly sculpting the shape that we're looking for. So subdivision modeling is great for this type of ergonomic design. And let's talk about, let's come back here and talk about that for a second. So we just saw a lot. It's mainly just creating complex shapes and surfaces very quickly and easily in kind of a new way of modeling, very different from what we might be used to as SOLIDWORKS users. But it doesn't stop there, because in Xshape, we also have access to a lot of our browser-based CAD tools. So let's continue. You know, we're not switching apps, but we have parametric features available to us that we could add in XDesign, or we could actually do it in desktop SolidWorks. So there's a great workflow for being able to bring the designs you create in Xshape with the subdivision modeler, bring them into SolidWorks and add features. But back in XDesign or back on the cloud apps, we still have a lot of other beneficial things, like, for instance, the system status that allows us to stay on top of our performance and isolate any gaps that we might have. You know, we can skip the sketch and just start extruding faces. We can use super features and toggle between extrude, revolve, and sweep, and even stop and make a sketch in the middle of a command. While thickening faces, any problematic areas are highlighted so that you can adjust your surface or your thickness accordingly. And the single modeling environment makes it super easy to go from a single feature or a group of features and just take them and make them their own component. Like in this case, we're making component out of that thicken command. We'll give it a name, and now that thicken command is now inside its own component, and those references, of course, are maintained. So we've gone from a multi-body part just now to now we have an assembly that has two components, the handle and that kind of primitive handle grip shape that we have. So that's the extent of browser-based CAD, or at least what I want to show you right now. So just being able to design parts and assemblies from anywhere with the cloud. Now, that being said, we haven't touched all of it. You know, there's quite a lot that we haven't gotten a chance to see just yet. We'll jump back in with more XDesign. But no, I think we had another question for our audience, right?
We do. We have a poll question. If we could get that one up.
Yeah, I'm watching that one right now, and that is, well, I guess this one would have been good to show before, but how often do you create complex shapes and surfaces? And it seems like this is what we expect to get some disparate answers here, because some people do it all the time, and then some people, their products are just very mechanical, very rigid, not a ton of crazy shapes or surfaces going on. All right, awesome. So we're getting a lot of answers in there. Seems like not a ton that do it multiple times a day to daily, but it seems like over half do it at least more than yearly or monthly or so. So thanks for answering that question here. I'm going to end that one and share the results while I pull up the other one, which is going to be great. So the other question we wanted to ask you was how often do your designs, oh, doesn't seem like it's, all right, let me stop sharing this one. All right, thanks for bearing with me, everyone. All right, so how often do your designs feature complex and or algorithmic driven patterns? So I'm sure if you're a SolidWorks user, you probably tried to use some crazy pattern, some pattern features before, component driven patterns, sketch driven patterns, equation driven, any type of pattern that you could do is, we probably have a way to do it in SolidWorks.
So it looks like we have someone multiple times a day. That's great to see too.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
I wonder what kind of products that they're making, that they make complex patterns all the time.
Yeah, let us know in the chat what type of things you would make with some of these crazy complex patterns. We're curious to hear.
Yeah, that would be great. Or even what products that you design in general that you're trying to see if these tools might help you. We'd love to know what it is that you all make. Pretty well designed. All right, I think we're trailing off on answers there. So let's share those results. So it looks like about a third of us never use complex or algorithmic patterns. And it looks like about another third do it monthly to yearly, and then the final third does it quite a bit, like weekly or more. So
I
got
think
to
these responses make a lot of sense, being that it's kind of a newer type of design. And it's perfect because, our goal here to show this is to kind of flip-flop those answers, get more people designing it multiple times a day. But it makes sense that those answers fall in that way right now. We also had a question, looks like from Chris, for you, Gian. Can you manipulate X design in the SOLIDWORKS app, or do you have to switch to the browser?
That's a good question, Chris.
Yeah.
So Xdesign does live only in the browser so that we can have it be accessible to anybody on any device. That's kind of the idea behind it, is any device, anywhere. When it comes to working with Xdesign and SolidWorks together, maybe that's more where your question is going. And the components that you create in Xdesign can very easily be integrated with your SolidWorks designs. So they can work together, but no, Xdesign is a separate app that you would always use in the browser.
Sounds good. Thanks, Gian. And
Yeah.
I believe we are up to the next segment, which is that X generative design, creating those patterns that we had on this assembly. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah.
And let me know when you can see it.
Yep, I'm seeing it now. Beautiful. Algorithmic design.
Okay, so we touched on it, or you touched on it a little bit, Gian, throughout the demo in this data set. You might have seen some patterns on the parts, and you might think, well, in SolidWorks and parametric, it might be hard to replicate that. It might take a lot of sketches, a lot of drawings. And so this cloud-based tool, X Generative Design, is really focused on cutting down the time it would take to make those designs. So first off, using it is just as easy as a hotkey X. They're designed to work with X shape and X design. So they're made to seamlessly work together. So you could switch in between them while retaining your data. So it's not like you have to close one and open the other. And when you're in the XGen or X generative design environment, you essentially have algorithmic control over the features, or in here, we call them operator nodes that you apply to your geometry. It requires a surface input. And basically what it does is it kind of turns those surfaces into 3D sketches. So for example, here we use the triangulate operator to split this surface into different triangles. All of those faces, edges, and vertices are completely editable. And that might be a bit different than typical parametric SOLIDWORKS workflows, but you could also see here, I used the thicken operator, very similar to SOLIDWORKS. I use the add and remove Boolean operators, very similar to what you can do in SOLIDWORKS. So if you have an understanding of SOLIDWORKS already, you're already going to know how to use a lot of these operators in X generative design. And this is just an opportunity to just build on those. It's a little bit different now in this graphical interface, but you could see how, if you're thinking how many planes, how many sketches it would take to make all of these individual triangles. Here, we can cut down the time a lot by making those complex patterns.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to make that in SolidWorks on a curved surface too.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also really important to note here, all these patterns that you do create, they still tie in seamlessly to the original sub-D, or it could be parametric X design geometry. So if you're using X shape or X design to make a surface that you create a pattern with, and then you decide, I don't like the pattern, or this handle, for example, it's a bit too thin, I want to make it thicker. When you make that change, the pattern will update automatically. Now, you do want to be careful here. If you make too many tweaks, you might have to go and edit the X generative design pattern. But here in this example here, I'm just pulling out the surface a little bit, 8 millimeters. The X generative design pattern will update automatically, and our model is ready to go. We also wanted to highlight here the branch and revision management. So we made a lot of different patterns here. We got really creative. We explored a lot of different opportunities. And the revision management tool just really helped us organize all of those ideas. And the UI kind of just not only helped us organize those ideas, but it made sure that we always knew we were working on the intended revision that we wanted to. So Gian was working on a separate handle. I made sure not to mess with it. Or conversely, we made sure we were working on the same one and not kind of overriding each other's changes.
Right. Yeah, that built-in revision management. I don't know how we worked together before that, but
Right. Right. And it's really just a preview of it because we're going to show it again because it really did come in handy several times throughout this project. So that was a little bit on algorithmic design and how we made those patterns. It's also common like with tire treads. We see it used a lot. If you see any other examples where you might be able to use a tool like this, let us know in the chat. We're curious, where this might be useful, where this might save you time throughout your CAD workflows.
who knows? Maybe you give us an idea and we'll make a demo of that product in the future that shows.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're always on the lookout for new demo content, new data sets to use.
Totally.
So next is on to additive manufacturing. And this was also something that we wanted to highlight because we have a lot of additive manufacturing tools that we used in conjunction with all of these design tools directly in our modeling environment. So we do have a poll question here. We want to know just how important additive manufacturing is to your specific workflows. So let us know. The question is, how often do your designs incorporate 3D printing or additive manufacturing?
Wow, this one's quick to get answers. We got,
yeah.
It looks like more than half of us incorporate it at least monthly. Which, yeah, this is one of those things where I expect the trend to continue. It seems like every year, additive manufacturing just becomes more and more, I don't want to say universal just yet, but it's very close to that.
I would say the learning curve of 3D printing just gets more like shallower and shallower. It used to be really steep, and now it's easier to get a cheap, inexpensive printer. And you can model up anything you want and just have a physical model of it, a couple hours later. So it's great to see. Wow, look at that. 22 people design or use 3D printing weekly or monthly.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. Here, I'm going to go ahead and share these results so you all can see. It looks like the vast majority, are weekly, monthly. We have a few that almost never do this, but we expect that.
Well, hopefully you'll think to do it a little bit more once we show you how easily we did it in this design here. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide. And keep in mind here, we're still in our design window. We have not exited. We haven't gone to a different app or anything. We have a feature called Print 3D, which is built in directly into X Shape and X Design. And here you can connect to a cloud printer, or you can input the build volume and technology of your own printer. So for this example here, I put in just the custom XYZ bounding box of my printer's build volume. You could also select the technology too, which is really useful because, different types of additive technology are going to have different capabilities. They're also going to have different challenges. So you want to make sure you're not just designing for 3D printing, you're designing for the right 3D printing that you're using. So here I went with material extrusion. And now we're in our virtual build area. And the first really useful feature that I want to highlight for you is support visualization. This is something that Gian and I used throughout designing these parts because we did want to actually 3D print some of them. We actually sent this to partners. We sent this data set to partners. They 3D printed some of these parts. So we wanted to make sure it was the easiest process as possible. I didn't have to remove a whole lot of support. And when we turn on support visualization, right now it's set to 45 degrees. It's automatically going to give me a live preview of all of the overhangs in our part. That if we printed this right now, all the areas in red, you're going to have support there. You're going to have to spend time removing it. You might have to spend time sanding it, getting the right surface finish based on your technology. So what we went ahead and did is just we edited that support angle. So I knew for my specific example, my printer could handle overhangs of 75 degrees. So we knew, okay, there's no red in this model. We could go ahead and print it right now.
That one was
Uh,
pretty cool.
yeah, that was a really fun one. And we also had support layer visualization. So this is really useful for visualizing stair stepping that might occur on your parts, which is common on a lot of additively manufactured parts. And that's how quickly it was to just plan out our build volume. It's inevitable when you have a 3D printer, you're going to have some type of third-party software that's specific to your 3D printer. Having this feature, Print 3D, just really eliminates a lot of the need to go back and forth between the two. So once we had the build volume planned out, I really only had to go into my manufacturer, my slicer once, and it was ready to print. So we want to be clear, it's not like a replacement, but it's a huge time saver and enhancement for your design process before you even hit the manufacturing stage. So that's a bit about how we used AM to prepare our models. We have our last segment here on Lattice Designer. And this is one of the newer applications introduced to the 3D Experience portfolio. It's getting a lot of attention right now, again, with 3D printing, because when you use Lattice Designer, you're often creating geometry that can only be created using additive manufacturing. And we used it a bit here in this bowhead data set, especially on the crank arm assembly, right, Gian? I
Yep.
believe that's where we used
Yeah,
it. And
yeah, and it was actually a really interesting way for us to use X shape, the sub D modeler,
right.
the kind of swoopy shapes. We used that to actually make this structural component, and
Right.
we still were able to add all our parametric features and everything. So maybe we can show
Yeah,
like a
tell
high
us a bit
level.
how you designed this in X shape before we
Yeah,
added any lattice.
so this was first, it was a new revision of an existing part. And then I used just all of our normal commands, like this is the flex command. We align things to curves and sketches right in the context of our model here. So, so we can still align entities to each other. We can use subtractive modeling techniques if we wanted to add some of that parametric geometry. And of course, we have things like the whole wizard in SolidWorks desktop. We have our whole features here. We have all of your favorite surfacing commands that you would expect to see in XDesign and XShape, but you could always use a subdivision surface like we show here. We're actually using a subdivision surface as like the split surface to separate our core and cavity. And then that cavity is what you would end up taking into apply a lattice geometry there, right, Noah?
Right. And just
Yeah,
go
so
ahead to the next
that's
slide.
essentially it. Once that's split up, then it's on to you to
All right.
go lightweight this thing.
To add some lattice. And before we go into lattice, I just want to focus on this part for a minute, because if you're looking at this, some of the interesting curvature you have here, it might take a while to do in SolidWorks surfacing, but you cranked this part out. You got this to me in what, like a couple hours? Not even.
Probably less, honestly.
Probably less.
That's one of the things that I love about Sub D, about X Shape, and it's personal. Like I bought the maker's license myself. If you want to buy a tool, any of these tools for personal use, you can go to solidworks.com/makers. I bought it myself because I love using it. It's like sketching for me. Like you're molding
Right.
clay. It's not an intimidating app, especially for people who don't even have an engineering background. It's
Mhm.
actually really easy to come in and pick this up. But yeah, just application of the fundamental features of X shape to get
Right.
really whatever shape you want.
And at the same time, it also incorporates all those parametric features that SolidWorks users know and love. I'm looking at this part right now. I see some of the cool curves you used in X-Shape, but I'm also seeing some holes, some precisely dimensioned connection points where you need those SolidWorks tried and true features. So just a good marriage between the two. And so now you've made this part for me in X shape and X design. You've sent it to me. It has the cavity. We want to lightweight it because it's on the handle portion of this where the users can be pedaling. We want to reduce all the weight we can so they can pedal as fast as possible. So we're going to add lattice here. And how do we do that? Well, the lattice design app, you can access it through the Compass, is an A app, which means it does require a download. So it doesn't work directly on the browser, but you could take in browser data directly into the app. So once you're in the Lattice Designer app, with your cloud geometry, we have something called the Lattice Design Assistant. And this is essentially going to walk you through the process of adding lattice step by step. So you select your part, the cavity where you want to add lattice. You can select the specific lattice cell you want, edit its length, its radius. You could also input custom lattice cells if you'd like. And then you get a nice wireframe preview before you're left with this final geometry. And it does generate this complex geometry often that quickly. And the best part about it is with other lattice tools I've used, once you generate the lattice, you're kind of locked in. It becomes a mesh and it's not very editable. Here, at any point in our workflow, we can go back into the lattice design app, edit the size, the length, the radius of all of these lattice cells. And that's true if we want to edit the X shape geometry as well. So Gian, if you made another edit to this outer shape, we can update the lattice geometry to that new shape, similar to what we did with X generative design.
Yeah, that was really cool when you just like pulled the surface out a little bit and it just recalculated everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So you could do a similar idea here. And then when we're back on the cloud with all of our different lattice ideas, again, just like X generative design, we got really creative. We explored a bunch of different lattice patterns. We used branch and revision management to organize all of those ideas. And once again, this was useful for making sure we were not really stepping on each other's toes. We were working on the right revision at the right time and just making sure that, we were in sync throughout this process. And once we came up with the lattice design that we want, incorporating it in our assembly was really easy as well, because again, we're on the cloud. All of our data is right there at our fingertips. So we did it in two ways. The first way you just saw was we chose it from our branch and revision tree. We could also search it with a keyword. So all of our data on the cloud is right there, just a search away. And we can drag and drop into our assembly. And from there, we have a lot of familiar mating tools that SOLIDWORKS users should be very, very familiar with, like concentric, mirror components. And this one, I wanted to point out the design assistant for mating. So here, if you have a component like a screw, for example, that you have to place in several parts, the design assistant built into the cloud will recognize those holes and place all of those screws for you. So really handy, really big time saver that we used here.
Yeah, that one is a really cool tool. That might be my favorite, is some of the built-in AI.
Right. Yeah, that's that buzzword AI. It's everywhere now. And then when we wanted to take this even further, so we have this updated assembly now. We have the updated lattice parts. We've placed in all of our screws. I applied some mates, but I can't get everything to move because one of the parts was still locked. Just because we're on the cloud and everything's there, we still want designers and collaborators to take ownership, so people aren't stepping on each other's toes. So in this example here, one of the components is locked, so I can't visualize the entire movement of this assembly. Well, I right click it, I send a request to the owner of that component, they unlock it for me. I get a notification that, okay, it's unlocked, and now I can see the real life motion of this assembly. And of course, yeah, I love that final graphic. And of course, everything that we make seamlessly integrates with your SOLIDWORKS assemblies, where you can drag and drop right into your SOLIDWORKS window.
Yeah, and I guess we never did Bowhead a justice. We never gave them a shout out. So Bowhead is a company that designs these amazing, I don't even want to call it's like an excursion, it's like an off-road three-wheeled bicycle for basically anybody who might not have full use of their lower extremities. So it's really inspiring story on how that company has come together and how much they've grown since then. And they've been, one of our biggest fans. We've been one of their biggest fans, and we were lucky enough that they shared some of their latest designs with us so that we could use it as an awesome vehicle or data set to show you guys all what's new in SolidWorks and with these cloud apps.
And it was especially great with that X-shaped stuff, right? Once they had a taste of that, they're really like, oh, we have to incorporate this in our model. They really,
still
the
working with them
subdivision.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely loving X-Shape right now, using X-Shape and SolidWorks together.
Awesome. And just to kind of put a bow on it, Gian, those cloud services that you mentioned before, once we've finished updating all of our designs, we can go back to those tasks, attach all of the updates that we made directly to those tasks. So your teammates no longer have to go searching for, what files were changed, when they were changed. It's attached right to the task. And you could also place all of not just the task, but the CAD data attached to that task in the approval state. So now your manager is notified, okay, this is done and ready to go.
Yeah, having the options for just formal, design workflows and change management is so important, especially once your company or your products get to a certain size or complexity.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was a little bit on our Lattice design tool. Again, new to the portfolio. We encourage you to check it out. And just kind of a little recap here, John. We started with cloud services,
Yep.
connecting our data to the cloud, not just so we can access it anywhere, but so our teammates can access it anywhere. A lot of people answer that poll. You work with multiple designers. That's what this is for. And now it's included with every seat of SolidWorks. Also, your subdivision modeling,
Yep.
just kind of a game changer, I'd say.
It
Uh,
really
when,
is.
mhm. When it comes to quickly just iterating designs, browser-based CAD, all that sub-D modeling, as well as some of our parametric tools, all on the browser. So you could access that from any internet-connected device. We also covered algorithmic design, so the X generative design tool. That's something we're seeing more and more that designers are experimenting with, whether it be handles or tire treads or something like that.
It looks like we
And
got
yeah,
from the chat too. It looks like Jeffrey designs a lot of phone cases that he says it seems like this would be awesome to use for adding patterns.
oh, that's a
That's
great idea. Yeah, I'd love to test that out. I'm
yeah,
thinking
we will have
already
to
like
make
the honeycomb pattern in
yeah,
X generative design. We could do something cool there.
yeah. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface of what you can do with that app too, because I've seen people use like images as a reference and then turn that into yeah, there's a lot of crazy things that you could do there, but a phone case seems like low-hanging fruit for us to try, just give it a try ourselves and
Definitely.
see what we can do. I also
Definitely.
just want to give James a shout out. He said that so James designs medical devices, specifically orthopedic. So a lot of interaction with the human body, which as we know, it's not very geometric, it's pretty like organically shaped for the most part. So using X shape and SolidWorks there, James, that sounds like you're on the right track. I would definitely recommend reaching out to your reseller about that. And then any of the rest of you who might have a need to mix those complex surfaces with your SolidWorks. So sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, not at all. I'm glad you pointed that out actually, because James, one of the upgrades that was just added to Lattice Designer was it's a type of lattice cell that's primed for osteo integration, something like that, where if you have like a hip implant, the lattice geometry is meant for the bone structure to grow in the lattice. So it's some really high level stuff, perfect for medical devices. And they literally just added it to Lattice Designer like a month or two ago. So very cutting edge. So thanks
That's
for sharing with
incredible.
us in the chat.
That, wow. So you're saying that there's an actual cellular structure that is
Yeah,
designed to work better in the human body, basically? Is it, I'm assuming it's for like bonding to the
exactly. Exactly.
wow,
Yeah. Having the bone kind of merge to the implants.
wow,
And it's something that can only be made with additive manufacturing. So that's why we made sure to cover some of those tools in this workflow as well.
wow. It's incredible what our customers are doing. Like I'm always amazed when we actually get to hear what you all are working on. It's what keeps us going, at least for me.
100% definitely does. I do want to make sure we answered all of the questions. Are there some that we didn't get to? I see.
Okay, yeah, looks like we got quite a bit. Hmm. Can you move a SolidWorks part into X shape so all sizing and dimensioning is established before pushing and pulling? Tom, that's a great question. That's actually exactly what I do. Whenever I know for a fact that I'm going to be using SolidWorks and Xshape together, oftentimes it's in an assembly. So I'll have like an assembly of SolidWorks parts, and I would want to design around. I want to design like push and pull around the assembly. So one of the beautiful things about connecting to the 3D experience is you can actually open up an assembly in Xshape. So you can open up your SolidWorks assembly in Xshape and then model right in context of that assembly. So yes, that's definitely the way to make sure your sizing and dimensioning is already established. And yeah, modeling in context there is actually very, very smooth.
Thanks for getting that
And
one, Gian. I see one here from Zavin or Zavin. Additive manufacturing requires CAD file input in STL. Is this automatically done with a feature? Yeah, so anytime you're ready to 3D print any components from either SOLIDWORKS Desktop, 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, or the cloud, you can export in STL. You could also edit the number of triangles you have on an STL to see how fine your file is if you really want those clean curves, or if detail isn't as important, you could lower that so it's more faceted. That way your STL file is a lot shorter. You have control over all of that. Personally, from the cloud, you're able to export in a 3MF format, which is just kind of a better STL version. It carries units, it carries color if you want a 3D print in color. That's what I currently use when I design on the cloud, but you can export in STL as well.
thanks for answering that one, Noah. It looks like we have another question. Will this work with all older versions of SolidWorks Desktop? So that's a great question, Richard. It does not work with all older versions, but there's a grace period of 2 years. So the current year's release -2 is how far back you can basically be and still connect to the 3D Experience platform and get all the benefits that we talked about. So we now release 2024, so I believe you'd have to be at 2022 or later to do that. But I believe we have some special incentives to help bring you up to the latest version when you do that. So I would just talk to your reseller and have a discussion there, because they'll have the most amount of info and what can get you the best, capabilities that you need right now at the best price.
100%. Thanks, Gian.
Yeah.
See a question from Tom. Tom, does this convert a selected part into a sub-D shape?
The convert to
question.
sub-D command that I've been asking for. Well, there's your answer. No, it doesn't exist today, but it's something we've definitely pushed for. So we will continue pushing and make sure that your voice is heard, Tom.
I do think it's somewhat possible in some of the CATIA apps, but it's still being perfected. It is on our radar. So thank you for that question. Let's see.
All right. I understand the strength weight improvement, although very difficult to clean throughout the lattice. Yeah, that's a good point, Simon. You probably don't want to use lattice for any parts that you're going to need to clean quite a bit.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be careful what 3D printing technology you use when producing lattice geometry. Yeah, I see it used often with powder. So you can almost, when you're done printing your part, you could use like an airbrush and kind of just air out or blow away all the powder in between. It might be a little bit more difficult with resin technologies, but yeah, that's a great point. It's a huge factor in what 3D printing technology you're using.
Awesome. Thanks for that. It looks like we got one more question about going in a loop between Xshape and SolidWorks. Like basically you want to start something in SolidWorks or in Xshape and then just keep going back and forth. So yes, it is possible to do that, but it's not like you have two different feature trees. So you kind of you have your SolidWorks. I'm sorry, it is basically you have two different feature trees. So you have your X-shape geometry up in that component, and then it kind of works similarly to like an insert part. You know how you can insert one part into another one and kind of have that be like your initial body that you'll then add more features to. That's very similar to how it works, but we have built-in tools and workflows for going back and forth and updating your original surface, and of course going back and adding more features. But
Yeah, you've been experimenting with that workflow a lot lately, Gian.
yeah, I have just trying to break it in whatever way I can. It's going pretty well so far. So yeah, definitely want to. I think we got through almost all of the questions here. Is there anything left? Oh, thank you, Simon. It's always nice to get some nice comments when people think that we actually did a decent job and want to tell us that. So we appreciate that. Thanks, Simon. Well, we
Excellent.
hope that you did enjoy this. All right. I think that we've covered pretty much all the questions. Any other questions that we might not have gotten a chance to answer? I think they're probably best to talk to your reseller about, which is probably best next thing. If we could show that next slide, our main
Oh,
call to
yes.
action is to, if you do want to learn more, go contact your value added reseller, and they should have all of the answers that you need. And they're highly knowledgeable, highly skilled people. AEs, our application engineers, and our salespeople, so they will get you to where you need to go. Yeah, and then a few links here. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so if you want to
Yeah.
learn more about what's new in SolidWorks this year, go to solidworks.com/what's new. Specifically about cloud services, if you want to learn more about that, go ahead and go to solidworks.com/cloud services. And then for X-Shape specifically, we have solidworks.com/X-Shape masterclass, which is actually a series of tutorials that Noah and I have been working on to teach basically anybody who has X-Shape how to get up and running with the tool, because we know it's a different way of thinking, it's a different way of modeling. So we figured, let's make this public facing free content for anyone to learn how to use these tools. And of course there's instructions and everything on how you can buy it for your own professional use or personal use and start modeling.
Yeah, it's over an hour worth of content. That's, like you said, Gian, curated for everyone, the advanced subd modeler to the brand new subd modeler. So definitely check that out if you're interested in that type of design.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you again so much for joining this presentation. And yeah, we will contact your reseller and let's keep the discussion going. And
Awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
thanks everyone. I also see James' question in the chat. Is the recording available? It will be available. So we will make sure to get that to you. And Tom's question above, how can we get in touch with you guys? You have Gion's name, you have my name, our names. It's our name dot our last name at 3ds.com. Feel
yeah, we
free
should
to,
have had a slide for that, but
yeah.
sorry about that, guys. But yeah, Gian.Khaleesi@3ds.com or Noah.Zeef at 3ds.com. So yeah, feel free to email us directly. But don't forget to contact your reseller, because they're the ones that are going to be able to really get you where you need to go.